Welcome to the National Museum of the American Indian. My name is Tim Johnson. I'm Associate Director for Museum Programs here. Regrettably, our Director Kevin Gover is not able to join us this morning because of a death in his family. On Director Gover's behalf and that of the museum, I welcome you to Representing America, the Evolution of Culturally Specific Museums, for an important discussion of a challenging subject in the nation's capital. This symposium will address a debate that was reignited in May 2011 when a federal commission recommended establishing a Smithsonian Museum dedicated to American Latinos. Critics of, quote, ethnic museums argue that museums dedicated to the experiences or cultures of specific communities are divisive, while supporters insist that such museums enrich the national narrative and offer more depth and perspective into what it means to be an American. The Smithsonian, with its cohort of world-class museums and scholars, including museums and scholars dedicated specifically to the examination of Native American and African American history and culture, African art and Asian art, along with the work of the Latino Center, the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage, and the Asian Pacific American Program, provides an apt venue for this vital conversation. Today's discussion concerning the development and roles of ethnic museums, and we should really be circumspect about this label, brings together museum directors and scholars from across the National Mall, as well as scholars and critics from across the country, from Birmingham, Alabama, to Seattle, Washington. By presenting various facets of the existence and practices of, quote, ethnic, culturally specific museums at the Smithsonian and elsewhere, this special symposium advances knowledge of a complex subject of substantial interest to American society. It provides an important step toward understanding the history of museums and matters of race, the development of, quote, ethnic, culturally specific museums, and the development of a cogent philosophy on these museums. Now, before I introduce today's moderator, I want to remind everybody to turn off your cell phones so we're not interrupted during these discussions. And also, I wanted to welcome internet viewers who are watching this symposium live, and welcome them to the program as well. Now it is my pleasure, great pleasure, to introduce the distinguished moderator of today's program, Ray Suarez. Mr. Suarez has more than 30 years of varied experience in the news business. He came to the NewsHour from National Public Radio, where he had been host of the nationwide call-in news program, Talk of the Nation, since 1993. Prior to that, he spent 7 years covering local, national, and international stories for the NBC-owned station WMAQ-TV in Chicago. He is the author of numerous books, most recently of The Holy Vote, The Politics of Faith in America, which examines the tightening relationship between religion and politics in this country. Mr. Suarez currently hosts the monthly radio program America Abroad for Public Radio International and the weekly politics program Destination Casablanca for Hispanic Information Telecommunications Network, HITN-TV. Mr. Suarez was a co-recipient of NPR's 1993-94 and 1994-95 DuPont Columbia Silver Baton Awards for on-site coverage of the first all-race elections in South Africa and the first 100 days of the 104th Congress, respectively. He was honored with the 1996 Ruben Salazar Award from the National Council of La Raza and the 2005 Distinguished Policy Leadership Award from UCLA's School of Public Policy. Please help me welcome Ray Suarez.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim Johnson, and I want to thank everybody who thought that it was a good idea to invite me for being here today. It was a great pleasure to be asked because as an American, as a lover of history, and as someone who cares deeply about getting this right the first time, because we don't really get multiple bites at the apple, I care a lot about the evolution of culturally specific museums. I have a couple of core questions. Who are they for? What do they do? And how do we know if it's working? And I hope that we can answer those questions across the course of today. The preparatory materials for this day-long symposium included the question, do they provide different portals into what it means to be an American? I think clearly they do. Each American may take away different understandings from the encounter with one of these museums or exhibitions in advance of a museum actually being built. But as we've seen multiple times in both the Smithsonian and in other historical museums around the country, anything that seeks to critique core narratives of American history, much less redefine them, is in for a rough road. There are accusations of political correctness, ethnic cheerleading, or overemphasis on darker corners of our shared history on this continent. If the museums focusing on Black Americans and now perhaps Latinos tell a different story from the core narrative, will other Americans even know? I think it's a valid question, given that once you create a separate building, a separate institution, a separate collection, and a separate story, you're not really modifying that comforting, reifying, reinforcing story, the big arc of American history that a kid could be expected to learn from K to 12. And if you just choose not to go in that museum, you only get the story that was told absent the existence of that museum. I'm writing a book right now on the history of Latinos in the United States from the end of the Mexican War to today. And part of my goal is to have the general interest reader say at least once in every chapter, how come nobody ever told me this? I mean, that's really a conscious goal that I have as I'm sitting down and writing about from the mid-19th century, the different immigrant flows from different places in the rest of the hemisphere. There are all kinds of stories that are very much part of the American whole, but because we shunt them off into separate alleyways and separate rooms and separate galleries in our national head, you could very easily go from kindergarten to university without ever having heard that. And I'm reminded of that every time I have to explain to otherwise apparently well-educated American why Puerto Rico is part of the United States and why one day when minding their own business in 1917, all my grandparents moved from being persons of not quite defined citizenship to being American citizens with a signature on a document at the Capitol with no Puerto Ricans in the room. So we have to keep that in mind, I think, in part because new patterns of information consumption are already teaching us lessons. The way people find out the things they know offer you the opportunity that you didn't have at another time in our mass communication to just consume the messages you want from sources that ratify your worldview, your already held worldview, and don't do anything to rattle the cage of the things that you already believe are true. And given that's becoming more and more possible every day, we have to wonder not if these culturally specific museums are divisive, no, just the opposite. Whether once you open the doors and say, come on in, whether people who just want to hear that story are going to come in and not have that core narrative disturbed in any way. That story of an English-speaking polity moving steadily west from the Atlantic seaboard isn't really true. Yet, what is true, you know? As a journalist, I have to wrestle with that every day. As people who work in this cultural space, people who run museums, people who think deeply about these things, many of you have to wrestle with this every day. So we don't want to create an American historical narrative that remains safe and ratified in the big house, and then have all the things, the big house, I mean the Museum of American History on the Mall, while all these other outbuildings are the places where you have to go to find out those other stories. We have a great lineup of really heavyweight guests today, terrific panelists and discussants, so let's move on. I want to give you a couple of housekeeping tips. I will repeat because, you know, even though you're all grown-ups and seem to be very nice people, it sometimes takes 2 or 3 passes to get people to really believe you that we want you to turn your cell phones off. After our last presentation this morning, our speakers will return to the stage and we'll have a question and answer session, so please hold your questions until then. There's a microphone set up right back there in the sort of intersection between the mezzanine and this center aisle. And we will ask you to go to that microphone because remember, this is being webcast and people all over America want to hear what you have to ask.